In business today, 3 things to know. First, from Nigeria, our special coverage of the World Economic Forum on Africa. Economics may have been on the agenda, but it's politics dominating the talk. Then, where are the jobs in Africa? Despite all the growth, there remains glaring jobs challenges for the continent. We'll speak with a man who wrote a key report on employment in Africa. And for Apple, the beat goes on. A $3 billion deal to buy Beats Electronics, the headphones created by Dr. Dre. Arise Exchange starts now.
I'm Julian Phillips in New York.
And I'm Andrew Schmertz in Abuja, Nigeria. There has been a clear change in tone from the Nigerian government, which is now fully engaged in the crisis over the missing schoolgirls and the stepped-up threats of the terrorist group Boko Haram. This as the World Economic Forum on Africa wrapped up on Friday. And despite all the politics, it really does all come down to economics, doesn't it? As Jerome Evans reports, there was a late-day news conference from the Nigerian president.
In some ways, this was the week that Nigeria came of age, as Africa's leading economy and democracy, with all the opportunity and hazard that comes with it. A couple of miles from the glittering halls of the World Economic Forum in Abuja is a glaring scar left from the most recent bombing less than a fortnight ago. It was the second Boko Haram bomb in the Nigerian capital in a month. Nearly 100 were killed, and it sends a chilling message to the government that the insurgency can reach out beyond its normal base in the northeast. Of course, that meant that security, which was always going to be tight for this summit, was ratcheted up to unprecedented levels. Every car, every person, every camera kit was subject to scrutiny. Not surprising when President Jonathan welcomed more than 15 current and former heads of state, with the Chinese premier the guest of honour. China's very important to Africa, and the relationship works both ways. But like every development arrangement, it comes with its own strings. For Nigeria, with a growth rate of nearly 7%, the economy can make its own strides. And it is. But President Jonathan also knew that the big issue facing his government in the year before an election is security. The evidence is here in the little village of Chibok. Nearly 200 girls were abducted from this school, which was razed to the ground by Boko Haram gunmen, who then disappeared with their captives into the remote countryside that so often seems beyond the writ of the government of Africa's largest economy. They're still missing, along with another 11 children taken this week. This was the week that the world woke up to the news. From being a minor story for 3 weeks on the traditional news media, it became centre stage on the week of the summit. That was because Jonathan took a big political gamble by explicitly asking for help from the world. That came with the United States at the fore. As the World Economic Forum came to an end, he held an impromptu press conference in which he said he thought the girls were still in Nigeria.
So that best you can say is that they are within the Sambisa area. Yes, I agree there are stories that, they have moved them outside the country. And if they move that number of girls into Cameroon, people will see. So I believe they are still within Nigeria.
What this summit showed was that even if Nigeria hasn't sorted out its problems, it's able to reach out to the wider world for support in dealing with them. For the parents of 200 teenagers a few hundred kilometres from here, that is little consolation until their girls are back. Everyone here and in the wider world was united this week in the hope that they would be the last victims of a movement that threatens security and economic development. Jerome Evans, Abuja, Arise News.
We'll have more from Abuja later, but first let's go back to Julian in New York, who has the latest market news. Julian.
Thanks, Andrew. Let's take a look at how the markets did today. The Dow closing at 16,583, the S&P 500 closing at 1878, and the NASDAQ ended the day at 4071. Now for a look at the stocks we are watching today. A U.S. magistrate judge in Arkansas says a Walmart store should face a U.S. shareholder lawsuit after being accused of concealing alleged corruption at its Mexico operations by a Michigan-based pension fund. Walmart closing up to $68.37. Netflix customers will have to pay $1 more per month for the streaming video service. It now costs $8.99 per month. Netflix closing at $79.20. And Time Warner's spinoff of its publishing unit, Time Inc., will take effect on June 6th when shares in the new company are distributed to investors. Time Warner closing at $328.55. Gold is closing at $1,288.40, and oil is closing up over slightly 6 cents over $100 per barrel. Well, for more on the markets and the economy, we turn to Andrew Schiff of Euro Pacific Capital. Welcome back.
It's great to be here, Julian.
And you finally made it through all that traffic.
Well, all that subway traffic, at least. In New York, you got to take the subway. It's the best way to get around.
Those bikes. Anyway, U.S. wholesale investors rose 1.1% in March, as you know. Will this have much of an impact on the first quarter GDP?
Well, the first quarter GDP, if you remember, came in at the end of last Friday today, and it surprised everybody because it didn't really surprise us necessarily, but it came in at 0.1% for the quarter annualized. Now, if you recall, back at the end of 2013, most of the big investment banks and the Fed itself had a annual GDP forecast, this is U.S., for 2014 at around 2.7 to 3%. They thought it was going to be kind of a bounce back year because the last few years we've been averaging sub 2% growth. So everyone thought 3%. Well, the first quarter came in at flat, essentially no growth. So, this report that came out today is, kind of cold comfort. I don't think it's going to really have much of an impact on first quarter. Now, the big question is whether or not the banks, the Fed, are going to revise downward their current 2014 estimates. Goldman Sachs came out this morning and reiterated its 3% for the year, which means for the remaining 3 quarters of the year, we're talking about 3.6, 3.7% growth over the remaining 3 quarters. We think the odds of that are slim to none, and slim just dropped out of the labor force.
Right, this doesn't seem like really a big deal, but here's something that has been caged, I think, as a big deal, but I really don't think it is. And we're talking about this House voted today to make a research credit permanent, rewarding businesses for investing in research and development. Now, but here's the deal. They're talking about $156 billion over, I forget how many years.
10 years.
10 years. It sounds big. But it really isn't that big.
$15 billion a year is nothing. I mean, when you're talking about a $700 billion deficit, what we have now, but we've run $1 trillion deficits in recent years, and I think we're going to be running those again. So what's $15 billion, 1.5%? So, but the bigger thing for me, I mean, I applaud any kind of tax cut, but when the government gets in and tries to influence behavior by rewarding or taxing or offering a credit, it never really works out. Businesses don't need an incentive to spend money on R&D. That's something that all successful businesses are going to want to do, whether or not the government incentivizes them or not. So when the government gets in and starts saying this is the kind of research we want and this is the kind of research we don't want, essentially they're picking winners and losers and they're guiding behavior. And they don't know what the market needs. So I'd rather the government stay out of it and just cut corporate taxes in general.
You're about as old as me. Remember that E.F. Hutton commercial? When E.F. Hutton speaks, everybody listens?
Yeah, no one listens when I talk. But
well, maybe not from me. Yeah. But of course, Fed Chair Janet Yellen testified twice on Capitol Hill this week. Are you surprised at anything that she said?
Yeah, I was. And yes, when Janet Yellen talks, the markets do listen. I was surprised a couple things. First of all, she's uniformly dovish. She maintained her forecast for the remainder of the year, good growth, 3%. So and they all blame it on the weather. She's been saying we expect the big, the winter was hard. In the spring it's going to be better, and we expect a big bounce back. If that doesn't happen, she's going to have to retreat. I was surprised by a couple of things. She said any kind of stimulus spending doesn't matter. You can spend money on infrastructure, you can spend money on just spending, and it affects the economy equally. I thought that was kind of shocking for a Fed chairman to express such devotion to Keynesian dogma that any kind of spending, regardless on what it's on, helps the economy.
I got to tell you, we got to keep our eyes on that. I was surprised about what you said about the housing market. We've run out of time on that, but hopefully the housing market will stay solvent.
I think the housing market's up for some rough sledding, given the fact that the starts look bad, a lot of stuff look bad, credit's tightening up. It's all cash market. It's going to be tough.
After the last word, Andrew Schiff, thank you so much, sir.
You're welcome.
All righty. Coming up, more from Abuja and the World Economic Forum with Andrew Schmertz. You're watching Arise Xchange.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to Abuja and this special edition of Arise Exchange, where we're covering the World Economic Forum on Africa. There is a push to turn the continent into one combined trading bloc. If that sounds familiar, it should. They're trying to model in part on the trading bloc of the European Union. There is a lot of work to be done, but they are making progress. And one man helping to lead the charge is Rob Davies. He's the trade minister in South Africa, and we spoke with him.
One of the things you're talking about is sort of the Pan-Africa trade agreement for free trade. What do you want to see that look like, and how much progress have you made?
Well, that's the eventual destination, but the project that's starting this is the SADC COMESA East African Community Free Trade Area, which is on the east coast of Africa. It's 26 countries, about 600 to 700 million people. So it's a sizable chunk of the African continent. And we have been negotiating this now for nearly 3 years, and we are making progress. Although I don't know whether we're going to conclude by the time that the 3-year initial time frame is over. But we are making progress. I think the important thing about this is that this continent needs to industrialize. We need to diversify and move up the value chain. We can't any longer live as producers and exporters of primary products and importers of finished goods. And so everybody at this particular forum has been talking about industrialization of the African continent. That means that we need to have larger regional markets, because when we export, we're not going to be exporting large distances, but we also need to realize that our domestic markets are not large enough either, so we need regional markets. So broadening integration, establishing large free trade areas with the eventual destination of the continental FTA is exactly something we've been supporting, but we say it's got to be complemented by infrastructure development and also by actual cooperation to promote industrial development, because many of the major issues that we confront when we talk about expanding inter-regional trade have got to do with production capacity, inadequate infrastructure, some of the issues of trade facilitation, and tariffs is only way down the lower down the list.
And how do you protect workers? Because you look at free trade agreements and take the United States and Mexico, for example. There are critics who say, well, you then just exported a whole bunch of jobs out of the United States. That's an issue, of course, a main concern to you.
Well, I think that basically all of us need to make a structural change and industrialize. If we industrialize, I think we will create many more jobs. Even if many of the jobs don't come from manufacturing as such, they come from service sectors. Those service sectors will be much more robust if they are integrated into an economy that's diversified and expanding its manufacturing base. So I think industrialization is fundamental. So I think that, well, obviously, within that, eventually, I'm sure the questions of labour standards may come up. But I mean, in our case, we've already got a free trade agreement with our neighbours in SADC. We have a high level of respect for labour rights and things like that. And I don't think we've found that this is a particular problem.
You have an ongoing strike, miners' strike, still very much a commodities-based economy that is hurting your economy. Any updates on the progress of resolution?
Well, I think that as the government, we have been trying to get the parties to end the strike. It's going on for far too long. As you say, it's a feature of a commodity economy. The price of platinum on the world market has not been as high since 2011 as it was then. The mineral products commodity super cycle has passed its peak. It's part of the reality, but I think that we have seen that the workers involved in that strike and their families are now beginning to suffer. No resolution in sight. It's time, our view, to try to end it. And the Deputy President has been leading a process to try to find this.
Do you think the strike and the overall state of the South African economy is one of the reasons that the polling numbers for the ANC are certainly much more narrow with its competition than it has been in years past?
Well, I'm not so sure that a 63% majority on a proportional system, we can say that things are much narrower. I think that's an overwhelming endorsement of the programs of the ruling party, the ANC, in this election. It's what we expected, and it's what has been delivered.
Okay. And finally, Nigeria has passed, at least by one count, South Africa as Africa's largest economy. It is a number. It is somewhat significant, though you still lead them on a per capita basis. What's your reaction?
Well, I don't think that we're talking about being top of the second division in the Football League or anything like that. The fact is that even though it's a statistical recalculation, Nigerian economy has been performing better, and we want the Nigerian economy to perform better, because if the Nigeria performs better, the African continent will perform better. So that's the first point. The second point I'd make is that as Nigeria is setting out on a course of industrialization, we are working with them to identify complementarities where both of us can work together and support each other. So I'm very happy that Nigeria is doing better than it was doing in the past, and I'm not at all worried about who's who in the zoo on the league table. So that's really it. They have 3 times the population that we have. They ought to have a bigger economy than us.
Rob Davies, Trade Minister from South Africa. Let's go back to Julian now, who has today's headlines.
Thanks, Andrew. Time now for our business ticker. Stories making news around the world. Well, the Justice Department is relaxing its rules on hacking. They want to give investigators more power to hack into suspected criminals' computers en masse, not just one by one. The Justice Department says the proposal is trying to keep up with technology that potentially allows criminals to hide their identities online. Privacy advocates worry the new looser regulations will infringe on the rights of the innocent. Well, a big U.S. bank is in some hot water. Goldman Sachs says its overseas hiring practices are under investigation by the U.S. Securities and Exchange Commission. The SEC has launched a probe into more than 5 U.S. and European banks in Asia, including Goldman, to investigate whether their employees violated anti-bribery laws by hiring relatives of high-profile officials. Well, Goldman has not yet provided further details on this investigation. Well, meat lovers beware. Beef prices have shot up to their highest levels in 30 years. Well, the U.S. Department of Agriculture recorded choice grade beef retailing at $5.36 a pound in March. Ooh. Experts chalk up the rise in costs to severe drought conditions across the U.S. over the last few years, which is responsible for a significant drop in the cattle population. Well, ahead, Apple and Dr. Dre may be making history. Find out why when Arise Xchange returns. Stay with us.
I think news does make people put things in black and white terms, just so that they have a dividing line between what their viewers like and dislike.
When they see a person of color, they either think that they're not going to do anything, they're either on drugs, or they got pregnant at an early age, and I just want to say that that's not true.
It tends to reflect more the interests of the upper income people and the upper income interests.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
Welcome back to the Exchange, folks. Apple is reportedly expanding its technology to influence into the headphone business. A multi-billion-dollar deal to buy Beats. Joining us now is Erich Joachimstaler, founder and CEO of Vivaldi Partners, a global strategy consulting firm that builds brands and develops market strategies. Were you surprised by this deal that's supposed to be in the making?
No, not really.
Why?
It's been in the rumors already, and Apple has been not very successful in streaming business, so this was a natural acquisition, perhaps.
Well, you know, Dr. Dre, of course, becomes a very rich man, $3.2 billion. I wish I was in his shoes right now. But how does this benefit both companies?
It has a lot of benefits for Apple. Apple's downloading business is flat, let's say. The album business is declining. Streaming business is a big opportunity. We see this from Netflix, for example, in the video category. So I think for Apple, this has a lot of upsides.
Dr. Dre?
And for Dr. Dre, it gets them to the $1 billion mark, I guess. So wonderful stuff, yeah.
I could retire in a minute. What does this mean for Apple from a branding perspective?
I think it's a little bit of an aberrant. There is a very unique identity, a unique brand philosophy at Apple. I don't think it necessarily fits 100% into this. I think it's the question is not on the device side and the headphones, let's say. I think that it's really about the streaming service, and that is really the big opportunity. So I think it is very good for Apple to build its ecosystem, we call it, around the music business.
Are these headphones actually that good? I've never put any on. Are they technologically advanced and all that stuff?
Can't say from my own experience. My daughters have the phone. They love the phone. There is a very, very deep consumer connection. It's a cool product. I don't think necessarily a very, very extreme or expert music lover believes that this is on the top end of the business.
But they're making money nonetheless.
And they make money because they have a very, very powerful consumer franchise, and that's what it's all about.
Okay, let's segue on to Twitter. Earlier this week, Amazon started a news shopping system that lets users go shopping on Twitter. What's your reaction to this?
I think it's an experiment. We are very early on. Mixing a microblogging site with commerce is new. It hasn't taken off. It hasn't been successful so far. Amazon is the way they make it work is potentially very good, but there's a lot of question marks still.
Okay, we got to follow the money trail in this. Where is the money in this, and will this actually work, in your opinion?
I think a Twitter service is a very, very specific type of news service, 140 characters. So it works for very specific kind of products. I call them impulse products, things you would not think much about, you buy on impulse. So it's a very limited type of, if you will, shopping occasion. And for that, it may work very well. I think we are experimenting only.
Yeah, I think I probably know the answer to this question. It's kind of a rhetorical question, but what is the market? Who are they targeting for all of this?
One way or the other, the world becomes more digital. At Vivaldi Partners, my company, we did this study on the always-on consumers, people who are on all sorts of networks, social networks. And what happens is today, 48% of Americans are at least 3 times a day on social networks. So Amazon has to be at that. It's not on the desktop, it is on the mobile devices, right. And that's where it's going.
Basically, everybody's just gearing everything towards the young.
Everything towards the young.
My goodness.
That's true.
I'm just going to have to get some Grecian formula here. To do
the millennials.
Do you see other companies actually getting involved more and more in this outside of this whole Amazon Twitter deal? Other companies perhaps following in
Yes, absolutely. I think it is just another path of purchase. We talk today about frictionless commerce, effortless commerce. You've got to be there. It is not a question of an option. You've got to be there.
Okay, I want that suit. I want your name. Erich Joachimstaler, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Okay. When Arise Exchange returns, more from Abuja. Stay with us.
I don't think that television news in the United States reflects the diversity of the world. I don't think it does a great job of even reflecting the diversity of the United States.
When you are watching TV, you don't really see a lot of different cultures. There are plenty of other places that people might not even know about.
We are living in a global culture, and you cannot hide news that is happening when there's so much social media.
Arise News, every culture, every angle.
The theme of this conference is really focused on job creation and creating more inclusive employment. What is inclusive employment? Well, Dominic Barden is with the consulting firm McKinsey, which recently conducted a study on employment in Africa.
The report is called Delivering Inclusive Growth in Africa's Largest Economy. What do you mean by inclusive?
Well, it's one thing to have GDP growth, but inclusive growth means you're creating a lot of jobs, that a lot of people participate in it. So ensuring that it's not just a small group of people that are benefiting, but the broader society.
And that is part of the criticism, that there's been a lot of talk that Nigeria is now Africa's largest economy by GDP. Per capita, though, it still lags.
Exactly. Again, there's been tremendous progress on the top line. It's then the notion of how do we ensure that we create the jobs that are there for the people that are moving from the rural areas into the cities. And that's going to be key.
And McKinsey has done some reports on the challenges of employment. So what are the key challenges? Where do you see the job growth coming? Because there has been a big focus here on entrepreneurship, basically that people are going to have to create their own jobs.
Yeah, I think the job growth is going to come from a number of different areas. We think that over 72 million jobs can be created over the next 8 years as we look forward. But they're going to come from some key sectors. I think agriculture is one, ag food, even in a place like Nigeria, which is actually a hotbed, if I could call it, of potential agricultural production. More needs to be done to unleash that, and that creates a lot of jobs, food processing, the supply chains related to food processing. And that's the same, by the way, across Africa. So ag food will be one big area. Infrastructure, just given the amount of money that needs to be spent, about $2.6 trillion over the next 25, 30 years, that creates a lot of jobs, building the roads, the railroads, the ports, the power. And so the notion is to focus on these sectors that create those jobs.
In agriculture is one of the challenges, and I spoke with a farmer from Zimbabwe a little while back, that the technology is way behind the curve.
Way behind. I mean, I was talking with the Prime Minister of Mali, who said that their yields are 1/120th of what you'd find in Asia. And that's because, you know, everything from the basic how you operate the farm, how big it is, then using all the latest in fertilizers, seeds, you know, when you do the watering, all of that is just not in place. So it's helping educate the farmer to be more productive. Then it's providing all the best ingredients that we can think of that are actually available now and putting that in place. And it's also supply chain. I mean, you can produce a lot of food, but a lot of it rots because there's no infrastructure.
Interesting, there's no infrastructure to get it out.
Yeah, the cold chains. You know, you have to, you know, I can't remember which country it was, someone mentioning that, you know, 60% of the cassavas are rotted by the time, you know, they get to the actual destination because there's just not the cold chain. So there's a lot of elements that have to come together, actually some pretty basic things, but so it's quite straightforward in terms of how to pull it together. And if we do, that's going to create very quick upside.
I imagine some countries in Africa are doing better jobs than other countries. Are the nations in Africa talking enough to each other to figure out the best practices?
I think they are talking. I think these regional sessions that are going on are helping a lot, whether it be in West Africa or in East Africa. But I think more could be done on the agricultural side. Also looking at, again, supply chains across the continent. I mean, not everyone needs to be producing the same things. And there's a lot of learnings on eggs and you know, and dairy and so forth that could be applied, and I don't think it is, and that's where there are opportunities to do much more of that. And you know, look at someone like Ethiopia, just even from a ag food strategy, they've been, I think, very much on the forefront of thinking about the entire country and all the systems that are required and what sort of investments are needed. So a more integrated way as opposed to let's just focus on dairy. And so I think there are some really good examples that are there that everyone can learn from.
One of the benefits of the World Economic Forum compared to the criticisms of the World Economic Forum is that this is really a place where people are sharing ideas. Anything stand out this week from here?
There's been a ton of things. I mean, I think that the World Economic Forum provides a unique platform to, as you said, get people together to share learnings on so many different sectors. In finance, there were some. Just how do you think about more inclusive financial systems, right? So that, you know, only 7% of the population in Africa has a bank account, but it varies considerably, and so you get countries talking and comparing notes. Ministers of finance, central bank governors talking about what's different. Ag food is one that we just talked about. Energy, power, infrastructure. There's just been a whole series of them, you know, at least 15 that I can think of.
And this is the result, isn't it, of relatively fast growth, and the other components just have to sort of catch up?
Yeah, I mean, I think that we've got this underlying growth, which is terrific. Some of it's from the resource boom that's gone on, but also this emerging middle class, which is going to be very considerable, very large. But what isn't keeping up right now is the infrastructure, right? If we looked, for example, in Nigeria, which again, there's been tremendous progress, but much more can be done, and that's going to require, again, infrastructure to make those workers coming in more productive. That's not happening enough. Education system reform, which is typically lags everywhere, we need to double down on. We don't have the people with the skills to do the work that's required. So these more infrastructure, long-term type things need to catch up, and I think if we can move those faster, we're going to unleash faster growth and more inclusive growth.
Andrew, once again, great reporting from the World Economic Forum on Africa in Abuja. And I've got to ask, after being down there and seeing everything and talking to a lot of people, do you think that this conference was a success?
You know, for the Nigerian government, you have to call it a success because it went off without a hitch. More than 1,000 people were here, and there were no problems. The military was all over the streets and very friendly. Of course, it going off without a hitch is the expectation. So they pulled it off. And this was a very complicated event. Obviously, a lot of the spotlight of the world on Nigeria, so they get credit for that. For President Jonathan, though, mixed results because, you know, he has this huge crisis. He's getting a whole bunch of foreign help now, but it also really put attention on him that this has gone on a very long time without him being fully engaged, or at least appeared to be fully engaged. That changed this week.
Absolutely. Of course, all eyes will be on Nigeria long after this conference is just a memory. And we've got some, for all your stellar work, we've got some Beats headphones waiting for you for your listening pleasure on the way back to the States, Andrew.
Nice, sweet. Thank you.
Thanks again, Andrew. Have a safe trip back. That's all for today. Thanks for watching Arise Exchange. Have a great weekend.